The U.S. Opting not to impose tariffs on critical minerals for now, and instead seek supplies from trading partners. Meanwhile, a bipartisan group of lawmakers is introducing a bill to create a strategic resilience reserve that would support domestic supplies of critical minerals. The goal is to reduce America's reliance on China. Joining us now, one of the co-authors of the bill, Senator Jeanne Shaheen. She's the lead Democrat on the Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, thanks for joining us this morning. It's almost Friday. Almost, not.
It
not
is?
Quite. Yeah, it's almost Friday. Like this SPR, can you think of it that way? Can you explain exactly what you're proposing here?
Well, first of all, as you pointed out in the introduction, the United States has been at the whim of particularly China, our biggest adversary, in terms of having access to those critical minerals that are so much a part of everything we need in our economy, whether it's missiles or refrigerators, cars. Almost everything is dependent on some of those critical minerals. And this is an effort to try and reduce U.S. dependence on other countries. We saw during COVID what happens when we are so dependent on other countries, when we had to borrow from China, from other places to get the cover-ups that we needed to address COVID, and we don't want that to happen again. We saw this as an issue last year when the president tried to impose tariffs on China, and China came back and said, okay, we're not going to allow our critical minerals to go to the United States. We're going to restrict those. So we're trying to set up a scenario where the United States is not in that mode of being dependent on other countries for what we need that are critical to our economy here.
So it would actually be an independent government corporation run by a 7-member board appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate. So how do we look at this? It's not really, is it like a public-private partnership, if you will?
Well, I think it's, hopefully it's going to be an independent entity that is going to be able to assess the industry of critical minerals, what we need in the United States, and do that in a way that hopefully takes it out of political influence in a lot of ways and rely on experts to see what we need. And that's what we've done in talking to people about how do we really expand this industry in the United States. What do we need to do? There's a focus on prioritizing recycling of some of the tailings and the residue from mining and other activities so that we can make better use of that as we're looking at how we address this issue in the United States.
Yeah, important. You have another bill with Senator Murkowski designed to prevent the American military from occupying a NATO territory. Isn't that part of the NATO? I think that's kind of implicit in the whole NATO agreement, in the treaty itself, isn't it? Or no?
Well,
apparently not.
You would think, but President Trump doesn't seem to understand that because he's talking about military action in Greenland. He's talking about trying to buy Greenland, even though Greenland and Denmark don't want that, and they're our partners to start with. So we think it's important to send a message that we don't think the kind of rhetoric that the president has been using around Greenland and Denmark, our allies who have been with us since before World War II, right, that's appropriate. And this is a bill that would make it very clear that that kind of action is unacceptable.
But there were some meetings yesterday, and one thing that the people did seem to agree on is that the threat of China or Russia, gaining more influence in such an important part of the world is real, and even Denmark seems to acknowledge that. Whether or not something like you're describing happens is one thing, but close relations between the U.S. and Denmark on what to do in Greenland. I mean, that could be a positive that comes out from all of this, and there's a method to the madness that we hear a lot of times with what people would characterize President Trump, a method to madness.
Well, I think the president's focus on the Arctic region and its importance to our own security is critical. But, you know, we've had a treaty with Denmark and Greenland since 1951. We've had 17 bases there. It was the United States that chose to close 16 of those so that we only have one left. We've had thousands of soldiers there in the past, and Denmark and Greenland have been very clear. They say, we're happy to partner with the United States. We're happy to work with you, Mr. President, on whatever your interests are, whether it's critical minerals or whether it's security. But you don't need to invade the country of Greenland. You don't need to try and buy it.